Hey, what's up, everyone? Hope all is well with everyone. Hope everyone is staying safe and healthy and sound throughout this time, especially with the uptick in cases of COVID. The most important person you should look out for is yourself. Today, I bring you episode 4 of the Bluurp Presents Founder Stories, hosted by myself, Daryl Austin, the co-founder and CEO of Bluurp. And today, I have the pleasure to interview my fellow Livingstone Blue Bear alum, Emmanuel George. He is an education turnaround expert. He started out as a teacher in middle school, elementary school, then did some founding principal opportunities with some charter schools in Harlem, USA. He worked as assistant superintendent, executive director of some schools, and now he's turning around another school again in Harlem. So he's been in the education field for over 20 years. Great guy, man. I call him the modern day Joe Clark. And now, without further ado, Emmanuel George, man, welcome.
Hey, what's up, man? How are you?
I'm all right, man. Glad to get you on the show, man.
Thanks a lot for having me.
No, glad to get you there, man. You know, we need to see more black male educators, period. And I'm glad I was able to get you on the podcast so we can learn about your journey in the education field, what kept you there, and what's your mission and journey. So we're going to get into that a little bit today. So for those that don't know you, tell us a little bit about who you are, man. Where you're from, what do you like? Just a little bit of everything about Emmanuel George.
I was born in Brooklyn. I grew up in Hempstead, New York on Long Island. I'm proud Tiger, graduated high school in 1995. Started off my education at Hofstra University, transferred to Livingstone College, majored in elementary education. When I was at Livingstone, I was part of something called the Center for Teaching Excellence. And that was a scholarship, full academic scholarship program that was designed to get Black men into the classroom. I think that's something that I've always wanted to be a teacher because my mom was an educator as well. She worked in our hometown district for over 25 years. So it's something that I've always wanted to do. Started off teaching in Greensboro, North Carolina, Thomasville, North Carolina, as an elementary school reading teacher. Came back to Long Island, taught for a couple of years, transferred over to the city, and mainly taught science for the last 5 years of my educational career. And I've been in school leadership since 2010 as a principal, assistant superintendent, senior director of school solutions, executive director of a couple of schools in the Bronx. Outside of school, I think one thing I've learned is to maintain balance. So I think a couple of things is like maintaining close friendships with people that I grew up with, spending time with my family, friends that I've made since I've gotten into education, and taking care of myself. Obviously, we all have hobbies outside of school. I love to watch documentaries, love sports, just the basic things. Being a dad, I think that's the most important thing, is being a father, making sure that my son is well taken care of, and we get the great amount of time together, family time, all those things. So try to keep it. The one thing I've learned is that you have to have a balance. You can't just be all one thing. And there's a clear difference between who you are and what you do. You have to make sure that you water both of those seeds consistently. So, and that actually helps me be a better professional, be a better person. So that's something that I've kind of taken, make sure I've maintained over time.
Nah, man, that's dope, man. See, you said something that's very underrated of separating your personal life and your professional life. I know everything is so intertwined today with merging the two, but the fact that you're able to separate it, man, you're kind of ahead of the game. Even at times I'm still somewhat struggling with that. And we will get into that in our work-life balance question where you can drill down a little bit more on how do you balance separating your personal and your professional life. But the question I want to get into next is what made you want to get into the education field?
I think for me, there was a couple of things. One, like I said, my mom was an educator for 25 years. She taught pre-kindergarten. But outside of that, I was raised in a household where we always like the idea of social justice and social inequities is something that we talked about pretty often. So the idea of social justice, so to speak, is something that was kind of drilled into me. And I think it's funny, my two older brothers both have experience in education. One has he's a general in the army, but he got a master's in education because he thought about like taking that route.
Yeah.
And my other brother taught PE in the Bronx for a year before he got into where he is now in computers. So we always had a thing about education, and it's something that it's just a part of who I am as a person. I think I started off like wanting to work with my mom's kids, which when she was a teacher and working with 4-year-olds. So that's something that just pretty much stuck with me over time. And I think over time, I've like the idea around the importance of education changed, even though I like looked at it from different vantage points. But you know, it's just the way I was raised, and quite frankly, foundational to what I believe in as a person.
Nah, that's real, man. Your mom sound like, she had a real good wielding experience on you, man, making sure you stayed on that right track, man. And that's, good to hear and it's commendable. So now to build upon that, just talk a little bit more about your journey from teaching into administration, throughout your career.
I think for me, when I first got into teaching, I didn't want to get into administration. And I think it was something that I was just going to teach for 30 years and then get the retirement pension and move to Florida. I mean, that was pretty. I was going to go to Fort Lauderdale and sit in the backyard. Hopefully, you get a boat. Like I really had no real I had no real sight for it. And I think so. I like the one thing that I saw like over time is that. First of all, when I'm always open with the staff, even the staff that I work with now, it's like I was a terrible techer when I first started. And I think that's something that I own. I was not good. And it took me a year and a half to really get good. So I wanted to, first, I just wanted to be a good teacher. And like, so I knew that like, there's a strong amount of practice and study that goes into that. And then once I became a good teacher, I saw that like, okay, there's limitations to what you can actually do. Right. So it's like, you can be a good teacher in your classroom, but things around you may not be ideal.
Right.
So what do? You want to grow and become a principal. You know what I'm saying? So then I was lucky enough to be a founding principal of a school called Democracy Prep Harlem, and in New York from 2010 to 2013. And I think for me, that was equivalent to like my teenage years. It was like carefree. I had an outstanding staff. Amazing staff, and many of them are still like I consider like peers and friends to this day. I learned how to lead because I was surrounded by people who, quite frankly, were outstanding. So it forced. It's like the NBA equivalent of a rookie head coach, with like a lot of good players. And I learned just some key lessons. I was in a situation where I earned the right to be assistant superintendent of Democracy Prep middle schools for around 9 months. And I learned structures. Like I learned the idea of how to take multiple schools and put things in place to make sure that they all run a certain way. And I think that was something that that was really good for me. It's still to see some of those structures in place 7 years later. I think to me, the most foundational work that I've done in education, I'm proudest of, is I was offered a position within Democracy Prep. It was a school called Bronx Preparatory Charter School. And it was a school it was a middle school, high school combination that was slated to get closed by the state. And it's kind of like the stuff that you see in a movie, like when you see like a bad school, the kids didn't fight, but like everything else was pretty, it was a lot of work to be done. And I think I worked directly with the school for 4 years and then indirectly for another year with the leaders of the middle school and high school. And I saw like how you can take a situation that's not ideal and make it really work. And you can see gains, and you can coach leaders to really have impact on teachers who could then have impact on kids. And you can see the growth, and you can see like the colleges that kids were getting into, like that the rise in the SAT scores, the rise in the middle school test scores, like the fact that the school like kind of came together, like and then we were able to do like some really cool things there. Like one of the years there, we had a Central Park Five, 3 members of the Central Park Five come speak at their
Mm,
graduation.
nice.
Like me, that's like to me that it was right after Trump got elected. So that was kind of like,
Yeah.
and it's something that it was really just a foundational experience that kind of like it was like food for the soul. It was really hard work, and
Sure.
but it was
Sure.
really like you could see like how you can over time just really turn a school in the opposite direction, and it kind of like spawned like a whole lot of ideas I had around like education, how it works. I was able to do some traveling and work with some schools, particularly in Arkansas, which was a really cool
Arkansas.
experience.
Mm,
Yeah, it was really good people. And the school I work in now, where it was, some work need to be done to do some repairing, but like the staff that I work with, I have a credible amount of respect and admiration for them. And I mean, so it's like, and you see them and they want to grow and get better, and they are. And I
right.
think that you see how you can really like take a school that was going in one way
Yep.
and you could move it in another direction, and you can see the impact that it can have on the adults and that work with kids and the kids themselves. And you just want to and I think that's just I'm really happy that I've taken that path, because you can see like the real work in education is just providing opportunities for kids and supporting those who support kids. And I think
Right.
that's something that I've learned over the years. And it's just like I've been fortunate enough to look at education from multiple vantage points. And it's
Right.
something I'm really thankful for, honestly.
No, that's awesome, man. It sounds like you really learned a lot. You really got a holistic experience from the educational side to the administrative side. But I want you to drill a little bit more on your transition from being a teacher to being an administrator. Because, like, for example, did you go to graduate school? Did you do any internships? Did you do any apprenticeship? Did you have to like serve under a principal? Just kind of share some of your journey, that transition, because I think folks out here, they're teaching, they may feel like you, I want to make change. They go get a master's in education, they may not know where to get the master's in, or they get the master's but they're told they got to teach for a few more years, and that dream may not happen. So just kind of share a little bit about your personal transition and some good tips for those who want to make that transition too.
I think for me, one, I got a master's degree in educational administration.
Hmm.
And I think from college in New Rochelle. And I think to me, that was a foundational part, because my professors, even though college in New Rochelle is not like Harvard or Johns Hopkins, anything
Sure.
like that, it was my professors were all current administrators.
Good.
So, and I think in a lot of cases, there was a lot of practical knowledge that was just drilled into my head that I use almost instinctively.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? Because it was just like a part of who you are. Like, for example, we had one of my professors talked about adult culture on your staff, and
Mm.
you can't move the culture of a school unless you move the culture of your staff, right?
Mm.
Now that's something, and we talked about ways to, what do you do as a leader? And the one thing I remember saying is that he said, you're paid to see the things that other people can't yet.
Mm.
And I remember saying, like, but you have to make your vision their vision. And that's something that I found myself repeating, especially when I was leading the turnaround of Bronx Prep. It was like, my job is to see the things that you can't see yet. And I would always say, when I would coach the leaders there, if you do A, B is going to happen. If you do B, C is going to happen. And then when I'm right, and more often than not, they go, dang, So I think that was the foundational piece. I think the experience that I got is that I ran programs within schools before I ran a school.
Mhm.
So even though I got my degree and I had to teach for a couple of years after, I think a year and a half after, I ran programs within the school. So I
Mhm.
ran summer schools.
Mhm.
I ran Saturday academies. I ran after school test prep. So all the components of leadership that that are that are that seem to be instinctive, I had practice doing it. I had to make sure
Mhm.
everybody got paid on time. I had to make sure all the paperwork was done. I had to give feedback to people. I had to give corrective performance reviews for people who aren't doing their jobs well.
Right.
I had to make sure that, like, if I ran a summer school, that kid showed up. I had to be aware about not just, hey, kids come in the building and they just do stuff. It was, you have to make sure that the school runs smoothly, that all your bases are covered. Who's taking attendance? What happens if a kid messes up? Are they going to eat? When, where, why, how? Where are the schedules? How do you communicate with parents before? Like, all these little things that you don't really think about as a leader, but I had so much practice in it. By the time I had a school myself, I felt confident in myself, even though I was highly nervous, because this is the first time that, like, my name is on it. So the one thing that I would piece of advice that I pass on to people that's trying to step into leadership is that there's a difference when your name is on it. Like, if you are someone who is like the grade level chair, like I was a few times, or you're the department chair, like I was once, or if you're running a Saturday school, you're responsible for things, but ultimately you're not really responsible, because there's somebody else who you report to, you give the summer school information to, or you pass the attendance to, and they have to take care of it, and they're accountable to, like, the board or whatever the case may be. It's different when your name is on it. It's different when you don't. It's different when everything is on you and you don't have a peer.
Yep.
Because you can't complain down, which again is something I learned in grad school. So you can't, like, nobody's going to care about your feelings because you get paid more than everybody else. So if you're going through a tough time at home, if your kid is sick or whatever, you're not getting the sympathy that you got when you were like a mid-level leader or somebody on a rise. Like, regardless of what's happening, you have to paint on a face, and you have to stand in front of your staff. You have to stand in front of your parents. You have to stand in front of your kids, and whatever's going on inside, nobody could tell.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Nobody can tell. So I think that's something that, like, you know, that's something that really, like, the school takes the character of your affect. So if you're someone that's kind of cool, kind of calm, kind of collected, the school kind of takes that feel. If you're kind of running around all over the place, yelling, screaming, then everybody's going to be on edge. So like, you know, so it's like, for example, the one thing that when I was at Bronx Prep, every year that I worked at Bronx Prep, someone that was foundational to me as a person passed away. Every year there was a parent, a big brother, somebody that was foundational in some way, shape, or form to my development, just as a human being, passed away. And I couldn't I had to find that place to grieve so that I was okay when I went into school the next day, or after I heard the news, or whatever the case may be. So, like, those things happen, and you can't, you have to find, when everything is on you, you have to find that place to be okay inside, because the way you are is what everybody else is going to be. And that's something that is, because it's all on you. It's all on your shoulders.
Man, yo, big ups to the College of New Rochelle. Sounds like I should have got a master's in administration back in the day to prepare me for my business career, because it sounds like they gave you some real good lessons that a lot of us, you know, should be learning and should be implementing in our careers, whether that's business, whether that's education, whether that's arts and entertainment. Like, you got some informative training, man, and some real hands-on training that's like priceless. And now I see how come you've been so successful and been a change agent in the education field. Like, you know, just a practical fact that the whole empathy concept of people not going to have empathy for you if something goes wrong and you're leading the school or you're leading the program. Like, you got to have that full accountability. And the fact that you were able to get that at such a young age to prepare you in your future, that's dope, man. A lot of grad programs, should have more practical stuff, and I think like the bigger schools do. But like, that's awesome, man. Much respect and shout out to the College of New Rochelle. So for those who are educators out there, and maybe they have an online program now that the world is on lockdown still with COVID. Check out the College of New Rochelle if you're in the education field and you want to get into the administration part of it, because it sounds like they really prepare their future leaders for success. So thanks for
Yeah.
sharing. Thanks for sharing that
Yeah,
tidbit.
I felt really prepared. And like it was almost like stuff would always happen with staff. And like an inverse, it's like
Yeah.
you have to, nobody's gonna have empathy for you, but you have to have empathy for everybody else.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? And we learned that, we drilled that, we practiced that, and it was something that you know came to play. Quite frankly, still does.
College of New Rochelle, people, check that school out if you're in the education field. See if they got an online program, and if you're trying to get into that next level of the education administrative aspect, check it out. All right, man. So we're gonna move on, man. So with your outstanding education career up to this point, what were some of the top career milestones since you've been in education? Like, did you win any awards or any acknowledgments?
A couple awards. I think one was I was one of the like New York City Principals of the Year from the Harvard Club in like 2012. I think that was award. I was like Principal of the Week or something like that for DNA Info in like I think 2011. I think to me, speaking early, I think going into Bronx Preparatory Charter School from 2014 to 2018 is the most, is quite frankly, besides like getting married, having a kid, being a good son, it's
Right.
probably the most important thing that I've done as an adult. And I think for me, because it tied into how I was raised, it tied in how I was raised with how I've been trained. Like the idea of uplifting your own, going into communities that are distressed and doing some active work around it and using the training that you got. So to me, I think that was in order to achieve those ends. I think to me that was I still look at it this day as like that's the most influential thing that I'll probably do. The current work that I do now is something that I'm very proud of as well. But the school, had some real areas of improvement. But I think it wasn't in the place where like the state was going to close it. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? Within 5 years, it's like a ranked charter high school in New York State. I think it was like 15, something like that.
Mm.
But it's also saying, so I think, and you see, to me, that experience was transformative to me. One, because I was able to grow and develop leaders who are still running the school now. To just the impact on some of the staff members who like come back and like, yeah, remember that stuff that you said in like 2014? You were right. And you see those things all
Yeah.
the time. But most importantly, is like you see just kids like kids hit me up on LinkedIn,
Oh
like
wow.
you know,
LinkedIn.
like kids that you saw like really struggling at one point in time in school, and now they're like about to graduate from Stony Brook, Binghamton,
Yeah.
Williams, Wesley, and they going to really good schools, and you remember what it was like, what they were like when you got there, which is like, let's just get them to go to class. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So
Right. Right.
you see that, and you see like as that was part of something where it's like there's a social responsibility that you have as a Black leader,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt like I did the right thing socially as a Black man to go into a school that needed some real work done and to get it done and to still have other people that are there now building upon it and still being able to go back and garner respect from people that were there from when I was there.
Awesome. So now, I want you to touch upon that social responsibility that a Black man should be doing for his community. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit more? Because in this time of everything going on and a lot of racial unrest and folks trying to figure out where they fit in, what they should do, how could they help, you know, talk about the Black man's responsibility being socially responsible in his community, or where he's being a leader at. Just kind of talk about that a little bit as it pertains to you.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm not Al Sharpton, right? I'm not going to lead a
Right,
march.
no.
You know what I'm saying? That's not my lane. I'm not Barack Obama. It will never be nowhere
Right.
close. But the one thing that I can do is I can put together and create schools and train teachers that can help kids improve their lot in life, right? And I think as an educator, we as Black men and women, Latina men and women, whatever the case may be, we're a lot of times we're tasked to work in communities where like the script for you is already written,
Mm.
right? The script, if you live in a certain zip code, your school's gonna look this way, your teacher's gonna look this way, it's gonna be disorganized, less materials, less resources. We'll get a couple of kids that kind of get out and we'll like, oh, look at Jerome is going to Columbia. Then like the rest of the class is like not even barely graduating and half of them reading on grade level.
Right.
But when you get to a place where I think once you get to a point where I'm lucky enough to have, my mom went to Harvard Law School. You know what I'm saying? My brothers went to West Point. You know what I'm saying? And graduated. You know what I'm saying? My mom was one of the first Black women to graduate from Harvard Law School. She was an educator, but you know what I'm saying? So, but she still, like, after she left education, she dipped in and studied her craft and her field. And I'm lucky enough to I won the gene pool Olympics. You know what I'm saying?
Gene Pool Olympics, yeah.
So I started off in a certain way on second base.
Sure.
And and I'm no better or no worse than a lot of our kids are in terms of where I was at 16, 17 years old. I just had people that rode me, and I came from a community that supported me, and I had people outside of my households, people's families, church environments that supported me. So I had expectations. All I had to do was just not screw up.
Right.
And a lot of kids weren't lucky enough to have what I have. So what I had growing up, I took advantage of it and I worked hard, but it would have been hard for me to fail.
Right.
I would have to try to fail. You know what I'm saying? So, and I feel like because of that, you go backwards and you give. If you in a position to give, you provide those opportunities so that somebody else could beat your lot in life.
Yep.
So you have other kids that are going to school. Like, I remember as a conversation with a young lady, she's going to Wesleyan now. I think she should be a junior. Yep. I remember convincing her to apply to go to Wesleyan. She was like, if I don't go to Duke, I'm going to shave my hair off and go to the Army. I'm like, why don't you just go to Wesleyan? When they're paying you to go to, they're going to pay you to go to school for free. You're going to get paid a couple of $100,000. Just do your homework.
Yep.
And just to do your homework and study. What you going to do for anyway? They're going to pay you for it.
Yep.
And to see this young lady come back, she's going to graduate college in another year or so, debt free. You know what I'm saying? Debt free. You can start. That's a head start with the degree in a university that is well known.
Yep.
You're going to start off life on second base too. So you got to provide those opportunities. And I think a lot of times as educators, we get caught so much in like, oh, theories and this and that and this. It's just, no, what do you do practically every day to ensure that the kids that are in your school can get to a place where they can better themselves? And I think that's our responsibility. And it's our responsibility as leaders of color to set up those environments where that can actually happen. And I think that's something and that's where I felt really strongly about Bronx Prep, because it was a school where that pathway wasn't clear, but then it got clear. And I think that's why I'm infinitely proud of it, because it goes back to where I started. The middle school I started was great, but I mean, honestly, I started off hitting home runs because I had a great staff, and I learned how to lead with a great staff that was talented and everything from the jump. They and I knew some of them. I taught with some of them in other places. So it was like, it was a collective there. Here, you're kind of by yourself. So you have to build that community. And again, but that community output is strong kids. And
Mhm.
that's our social responsibility.
Right. Man, that's well said, man. I haven't heard an eloquent response like that in a very long time, man. So it's just about reaching back, pulling others forward, creating an environment where folks can be successful. Now, I love it, man. You keep doing what you're doing, man. So now we're going to pivot into innovation and education in COVID. So with COVID-19 happening, how does the impact teachers that are preparing to teach students and educate students now? Like what is that looking like? I've heard different stories of, parents homeschooling, or the teachers delivering curriculum to the kids besides teaching online. Like, what's going on with all of that?
I think there's so many, I think this is where education, there's the expression like necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
Like this is a sad time in society because of where we are, but this is an informative time in education because you're in this, there's plenty of room for innovation. And I think what teaching looks like in online, good online teaching shrinks the intellectual distance between kid and teacher. What
Mm.
that means is that there are a couple of things that you want to do consistently in a virtual classroom. Number one, you got to set up, sorry to say this, but you got to set your Zoom settings to ensure that you know you gotta do that. You
Yeah.
gotta do, and that's a reality because kids are gonna be kids, and you got to make sure that those disruptions don't happen. You got to know how to run a break room. You got to know when to put kids in the break room. You got to know who to let in. Do they have a verified email? You got to know to set your codes up so you can take
Mm.
attendance automatically. Like those things, so you don't disrupt the instruction. Those are the things that you have to do on the back end. That's the foundational part, right? You had to do that. Like you could have plan the greatest lessons in the world, but if it's you can't control your room, it's a waste of time because the
Mm.
kids are going to destroy your room. Then you have to make sure there's just a couple of go-to things. Number one, you have to, when you say shrink the intellectual distance, you're not in a classroom with them, but you have to make sure that one, you tap into multiple learning styles.
Yeah.
You got to make sure that kids can hear, see, and do.
Yeah.
And as much as possible within the same lesson. You shouldn't just be like a conversation and the teacher's writing on a board and blah. They should hear it, they should see, they should do. And that's something that you have to consistently do all the time.
Mm.
And then thin slicing that to a bit in terms of what does doing mean for kids. That means like using extensions like Nearpod, where you can have kids, you can literally collaborate openly with everybody. So let's say, for example, you and I, this is part of a Nearpod program, is like you
Yep.
can type an answer and put on a sticky note, it goes on a virtual whiteboard.
Mhm.
And now kids can see each other's answers, see each other's work. You
Mm.
can set up like separate cameras. So if you want to give live notes, you can actually give live notes. You just have to like connect. Like if you have like your Zoom on your computer, have a Zoom on your phone, point to Zoom on your phone, and you can like take
Right,
notes on
right,
your
right.
phone and it goes to your computer. So it's like you're mimicking writing on a board. You have to give kids opportunity. You have to challenge them at work, give them opportunities to answer a lot of questions. And you got to give them time to talk to each other too. It can't just be you just running your mouth and droning on because, kids are going to fall asleep, whatever. But you give them opportunities to say, hey, we're going to go break out into this room. You're going to go into breakout rooms for 10 minutes. You're going to discuss these questions. We're going to come back together and we're going to discuss. And now as a teacher, you got to be able to manage that and then also know how to hop in between breakout rooms to ensure that your kids aren't in there talking about the Lakers game or whatever, right? So,
Right.
so you think about all those different things, but it's just making sure that kids are seeing, hearing, and doing. And they got to do that consistently throughout every lesson. And they have to have plenty of opportunities for you to check to see if they actually understand what you're doing. You have to tell them what they're going to learn at the beginning. You got to assess it in the middle to make sure they get it right. And you got to formally assess them at the end. And I think if you do that kind of consistently with like a lot of like variables along the way, you can run a virtual lesson that can really help kids learn. It could kind of engage them a little bit.
Wow, it definitely sounds like teachers now have to invest themselves in technology more. They're now educators slash technologists, and then also even from the different connectivity challenges, it even sounds like there's opportunities for improvement from a technological and connectivity standpoint to ensure that teachers are able to facilitate and connect with kids more seamlessly so they're not all over the place. So that's interesting you point that out. And there's definitely room for opportunities to improvement. So for you techies out there that may be listening and you build apps, there's an opportunity
Yeah.
in the education field. Don't always go for the shiny object trying to be the next Zuckerberg or the next Jack Dorsey or the next Elon Musk. Education needs help. They need innovation. If you can create some technological tools to improve that value chain from teacher to student, the education field needs you. So I appreciate you showing that out there, Manny, and letting the world know that. So with all of that challenges going on with homeschooling and stuff, what tips can you provide to parents who are now forced to homeschool, who are forced to have homeschool environments? Are there any lesson plans available to aid parents or additional tutoring services available to students?
I think a couple of things. One, I think first of all, it starts with the setup. You gotta give your kids just like their own little hole or corner where they can work, where they're kind of away from the TV,
Mhm.
maybe away from their phones, because it's like us as adults. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, so it's the same thing as kids. Like, you gotta give them, just if you can, give them a space that is dedicated solely to work, right? Um, Couple of sites that would always be great. One is Khan Academy. Khan Academy is it has like it's the idea of what they call like a flipped classroom. A flipped classroom is like a teacher teaches, records a lesson, and posts it, and the kids could download it, watch it on their own speed, take notes, do examples, whatever. And that's what Khan Academy basically is. I think to me, and they have from SAT prep to like first grade math, like and anything in between. I
Right.
think that would be like a go-to. I think some other tools like IXL. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. But I think to me, the place would be Khan Academy. I think that is like a foundational place to start where it's basically free and you can kind of run with. There are also other apps and programs, but a lot of them are connected to schools specifically. Another thing that you can do if you're a parent is make sure you have regular contact with your teachers and make sure that you know what they're doing. And if depending on their age, provide supplementary materials. Like even for me, on my son in the second grade, like whatever he's working on, we got we got workbooks for that. So once he's finished his homework, like, oh, you're working on handwriting, great. I mean, handwriting without tears. Here you go. And I think Amazon just has tons of just subject, because I know like Barnes and Nobles and places like a lot of places are closed, especially in our neighborhoods, which goes back to social responsibility.
Yep.
In New York, Scarsdale, I gotta go to Scarsdale to go to Barnes and Nobles, right?
Really? Wow.
Yeah, yeah. But but then again, I have the wherewithal to go there, and it's only 20 minutes from where I live.
Hmm.
But I think it's like Amazon has like workbooks on every grade level, content area, whatever the case may be, and just find the one that connected. I think the key thing to look at if you're looking for a workbook is Common Core line. Just want to make sure that any work that you present to kids at home, in addition to work, is Common Core line. So it somewhere along the line, the kids are thinking the way that the teachers are asking them to think. But the additional practice, Khan Academy, and additional workbooks, I think that in a quiet space to work, like those are like the key places where those are just key actions that most parents can take.
Now, awesome, man. Thanks for sharing all these resources, man. And because I think a lot of parents, for the first time, they having to really, really be in a kid's life with educating them in the class as far as their subjects in the classroom and making sure they're, not only just reading the data, but they're, internalizing it and they're analyzing and they're understanding it. And, there's different challenges because they're not teachers. They're not trained to be a teacher. They don't know how to necessarily teach their kids. They know how to govern their kids. They know how to care for their kids. They know how to love for their kids, but teaching them specific subjects so that kids can obtain it and apply it in the real world, that's something new. So I appreciate you sharing these resources to help the parents out because they definitely, I've talked to quite a few people, they're homeschooling and they're struggling. So I appreciate you
Yeah.
sharing those resources.
Because the one thing that parents will understand in a lot of cases is that sometimes kids are naturally resistant to doing work. So there's a different type of pushback that you get when you're at home. Because let's say normally when I'm at home with my kid, it's just kind of like, hey man, you know, clean up, brush your teeth, you know, wipe the floor. Okay, let's read. Because obviously, oh, the kids got to read. I'm sorry, I should have said that. They have to read all the heck on time. Like depending on whatever grade level they're in, if they're in elementary school, get like small book series that are equivalent to their grade levels. If they're in middle school, get high interest books. And if your kid likes basketball, they should be reading about basketball. Like if your kid likes computers, make them read about it. And then when they get like to upper middle school, high school, read like current events consistently, get actually like subscribe to a newspaper online. You know, if you're not going to get a physical copy of a newspaper, and then do it with them and show them, do it yourself too. Because if you read, then your kids will read, you know. So I think that's something that I should have said first, because that's the foundation of everything else. But there's a different type of pushback that you get when you ask kids to do work. And that's where a lot of struggle comes in. So I think there's a more thin slice understanding of what educators actually have to do every day, because part of being a teacher is asking kids to do stuff that they don't feel like doing,
right,
making it appealing. And so so I think that is, you know, so I think those are things that will be helpful too.
Nah, man, no, thanks for sharing all of that information, man. I don't think folks are able to find out just what you shared and the concepts and ideas and understanding and the theory behind what you just mentioned. So I'm glad you shared that. So as to stay in this educational innovation stuff of what's going on, as with any chaos, there's always some sort of opportunity to improve. What are some innovations in the education field that come to mind for you at this moment in time?
Learning how to coach teachers remotely. I think that's something, and learn how to work with leaders remotely too, and learn how to coach leaders remotely. Learning how to review lesson plans, review professional development sessions, deliver professional development when you're not there, right? Because I think a lot of times as a teacher and as a teacher leader and as a leader of leaders, you rely on like the one-on-one connection. And I think, and a lot of times you can, it emphasizes the distance, emphasizes preparation. Because you have to engage a leader when you're coaching them. You have to engage a teacher that you're coaching. You have to really be prepared. You always prepare, but you have to be over prepared, because you know you don't have that physical touch. So like after 20, 25 minutes, that you know, just staring at the wall or whatever. You have to really make sure that you are thoroughly planned. And I think the innovation there is key. I think the idea of coaching teachers and leaders remotely and working with leaders remotely, the idea of using technology, infusing videos, you know, just quite frankly, Zoom, screen shares, breakout rooms, all these things that this time last year, I didn't know what Zoom was.
Right.
You know, so it's like now I could, let me share my screen with you and let's whatever the case may be. I think the innovation is learning the new sites that teachers are using to assess kids and get data from them. That's going to influence how you lead and how you work with leaders. Like the idea of knowing what Junopod is, knowing how to organize a Google Classroom website, knowing how that actually works. You know, and there's things that you can do in the physical space once school returns that you can add as adapting from what you get virtually. Like to me, like if you get back in the physical space, every teacher needs to drop their work on Google Classrooms anyway. Because like a common thing is like, I don't know what a makeup work is. Oh, go to Google, our Google Classroom site, click it, download it from there, whatever. Which is simpler than, you know, hold on, I got to go to the bin and get like worksheets from like 3 days ago. And it, you know, so like there's a lot there. I think that's where the innovation comes in, learning those tools and then sharpening how you communicate. You have to really have clarity in your communication. Like for me, like even this year with the staff I work with, like all my communications on one Google Doc.
Right.
They know what I'm saying? So it's like, here, click that.
There you go.
And there's something else. Like, so every time I send an update to a parent, I have another Google Doc. I just link them all together, just hyperlink them. So it's like, oh, he said this to this parents on Tuesday. oh, this is the update for us for what's happening this week. You don't have to search and find emails. You put everything in one
Yep.
place. Like even me coaching teachers, I just, for the teachers I coach and the leaders I work with and coach, like the assistant principals, the ops manager and stuff like that. There's just like one development document. I put all your feedback in one place. Go there. You know what I'm
Yep.
saying? So you learn how to have those conversations virtually. You learn how to engage people, and you learn how to prepare so you can make sure that you maximize your time, because you don't have the accountability of like having someone right in your face, so
Right.
they could do whatever. They could be playing a video game for all you know.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So you have to really lock in and engage with them.
That's awesome, man. No, it's just lots of opportunities in the education field, and it sounds like this one's all about organization and making sure you maintain coordination, you're maintaining motivation, you're maintaining alertness, all of those things. In reference to teachers and planning. No, this is good to hear, man. I really appreciate you sharing all of these insights, man. It's very helpful. So now we're going to shift into a project you're working on right now. So tell us about your in progress consulting firm, Unbuntu Educational Services, such as what services will your firm be offering to the education industry?
I think for me, the idea of Ubuntu is, again, it goes back to a value. The value is I am, Ubuntu literally means I am because we are, right? So it is a collective spirit within this is obviously some derived from African communities where like the community is responsible for the individual. Like, and I think for me, the idea of starting a consultant firm is adding, first of all, for me, it's an opportunity for me to kind of help through executive coaching of teachers and leaders. And then, as we grow, do like, formal school reviews, do formal professional development sessions, things like that. But like the idea, doing interview prep for teachers that
Mhm.
are preparing for jobs, because
Yep.
I've been on the other side of the table. I've I review people interview and do demo lessons all the time. So
Right.
I can help you prepare for them. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Or
Yep.
we can help you
Yep.
prepare, like we can executive coach teachers if they don't feel as comfortable with the coaching that they're getting at schools. There have been times throughout my career where, especially when I was a teacher that was good,
Right.
that like I was like, all right, you fine. We got to worry about these people over here. And I was like, but what about me?
Right.
Or if I was someone earlier in my career who quite frankly struggled and knew it but didn't, was just trying to figure out where to go.
Right.
Like, so you want to, that's something that we offer too. And also the idea of executive coaching leaders
Yep.
and providing guidance, feedback to all components of leadership is something that we're going to offer, because again, going back to what I said earlier, leadership is a lonely place, and
Yes.
you don't have that peer, and you don't have that person that you can, that's on your staff that you can connect to. Now some leaders are fortunate enough to have like dedicated coaches, but
Yep.
some don't, or some not may not be happy with their coaching. And I think for us, the idea of Ubuntu, I am because we are, is we're bringing that into education. The idea is quite simply anybody who, we're going to work to improve the skill set and the mindset of anybody that's working to improve the skill set and the mindset of kids.
Yeah.
So whether it's a teacher that is entering the education field that's looking for a job and wants to help with a demonstration lesson, hey, how does this look like? If I'm a teacher that wants some supplemental coaching, if I'm a leader who needs some executive coaching, how do I run PDs? How do I run good coaching meetings with teachers? How do I deal with difficult staff issues? How do I set adult culture? How do I set a data-driven culture in my school? How do I set a reading culture in my school, especially if you have younger kids? Like those are things that we're prepared to work with now, because again, my
Right.
social responsibilities, this is going to be done now
Right.
in addition to what I already do. So I'm not going to take away from, I'm not going to rob Peter to pay Paul, right?
Sure. Yep.
But this is something that I'm fully capable of doing. But I think as we grow, it's the idea of like servicing schools, because that's something that I've had a fair amount of good experience with, but servicing entire schools, running professional development, training mid-level leaders, doing overarching school walkthroughs, school reviews, coming up with action and data plans. I think that's the work that I mentioned, like going to Arkansas and doing some work with some schools down there. That's literally what I did, like walking into a couple of schools that wanted to improve and being able to improve them over a span of 6 to 7 months and training their leaders, training their superintendent, honestly. Training their teacher leaders who then went and trained their teachers who then went and helped kids grow academically and behaviorally. Like thinking holistically. But I think for now, when we launch, hopefully by November 18th, that's kind of a significant date for me. Like that's the time when we're going to launch and you start working with those individual teachers, individual people that are trying to get into the profession, leaders that want to grow, teachers that want to get better at their craft. And then if there's targeted work that could be done in schools in conjunction with what I'm doing already, working something out with that. In time, the whole every time you start, like when you start one McDonald's, you want to have a chain, right? So every time you want to be in a position where you service multiple schools and you're in a position where you can like help schools get better. And I think for me, having led the processes is again that you want to give back to places that need to be helped and led. It's just it's the multiplying effect. You want to be able to multiply the work that I've been able to lead in other places. Because the one thing that I've learned, I've been lucky enough to do a little bit of travel, whatever. Like there's schools across the world, quite frankly, that Brooklyn, no different than Baltimore, different from Boston, that's no different from Charleston, South Carolina, or Little Rock, Arkansas, or Waco, Texas. Like schools across the country, no different from Brixton in England. Schools across the country and eventually the world want to get better and is trying to find how. And I think what we're going to bet on with Ubuntu Consulting Services is that we can be a part of that change. And that's something that I feel strongly about. And I think for me, that's that, like you have to have a seeking spirit as an educator. That's something, so that's part of that, like, okay, who else can I work with? Like you help people informally all the time. That's always kind of always help people. Hey, I need some advice. What about this? Oh, thank you. Like, I think we could do something with that. And I think we can do something to formalize that. So that's where we want to start. And, if things work well, you grow with your capacity to grow.
Now, that's awesome, man. I mean, all of that is fantastic and is definitely needed. Even the coaching piece. So I know like right now we live in a time, mental health and therapy is important, but coaching is also important too. I think, especially in our community, a lot of us were taught to do it ourselves because we didn't have access to these resources and opportunities before. So we had to do everything on our own. But now time today, it's okay to get help if you get stuck. It's okay to get help to get better. You don't have to try to do everything on your own, because when you get help, it frees you up to do other things. So that way you can continue on your journey. And also you getting to help get other people involved in your life. So I like the concept that you're even going to have executive coaching for teachers to prepare them for interviews and teaching demos, things I'm sure that probably wasn't available even when you were doing your teaching demo for teaching jobs. So you're making that available to teachers coming out. And that's extremely important, especially for our community. And we're going to talk about how to get more like Black and brown teachers into the education field. But no, what you're offering just from that executive coaching standpoint, that's going to be gold, man. And I'm glad you're doing this and you're sharing your expertise to the world as well as our community.
Yeah, it's important because I think a lot of times the one thing that comes to mind is that kids can't afford to wait, right? And I think we can afford to wait because we have some sort of privilege, right? Like we got multiple degrees. I'm not gonna, if I have to leave my job, obviously you don't want to, but my next job isn't gonna be like bagging groceries at Key Food, right?
Right,
Because
right.
I've had, no offense to anybody that does that for a living, because we
Sure.
all gotta feed our
That's
kids.
all. Yeah.
But at the same time, like I've had I've earned, quite frankly, degrees, and I've been lucky enough to have the privilege to be put in a position to earn that,
Right.
right? And I've earned experiences through just, quite frankly, hard work, but I've been lucky enough to be put in those positions. The one thing that I'm proudest of as being a leader is that, God, at sometimes there are at least 9 or 10 people that taught under me that are leaders in some way, shape, or form themselves.
Mm.
And I always tell them that my leadership path was, quite frankly, self-made. Like I went to school at night, drove a little hoopty
Yep.
so I could afford to pay to go to grad school,
Mm-hmm.
did the internships, worked 6 days a week, worked on Saturdays, taught multiple grade levels. Like I literally was just from the bootstraps type stuff, right? But I wanted it, so I did it. I don't think that that's a replicable pathway for everybody.
No.
I want to make it easier for people.
Yep.
I want to make it easier for people to be good teachers. I want it
Mm-hmm.
easier for people to be good leaders. I want
Yep.
it to be easier for intern teachers to come into the field and know how to actually do an interview properly and get a good job
Right.
that you want, because kids can't afford to wait.
That's
Like
right.
your input has to have lead to an output.
Yeah.
And the output of all that work is, I want to be able to provide, like, again, I am because we are. A kid is because we as educators are,
Mm.
right? That's the idea of Ubuntu, right? I am because we are, right? So the idea is giving kids can't wait for adults to get good.
That's right.
I want to be able to accelerate that process. And from all the vantage points that I've had within my career, it's an opportunity to 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 step back, to give back when possible, but at the same time, do it in a way that has a multiplying effect.
Nah, that's awesome. And yeah, I just like the fact that you're improving that value chain of that process of educating the kid, and you're getting it at the beginning to shorten that cycle. That's awesome, man. So no, I'm looking forward to seeing great things out of Ubuntu, man. Absolutely. So speaking on that, what can be done to get more Black and Brown teachers in the classroom and to get them to stay in the education field, as there's a great deal of attrition that happens, unfortunately, especially for Black male teachers.
I think a couple of things. Number one, there's something that's incumbent upon Black teachers, is that you can't, a lot of times, and I almost fell into that trap. It's like, it's not who you are, it's what you do with who you are, right? So
Mm.
if you are a Black teacher in a school that's predominantly Black or brown, whatever you want to call it, kids are natural BS detectors. So you're going to get rope if you don't know what you're doing for a little bit, because they want to connect with you. But once they make the determination that you don't know what you're doing, they're going to treat you as if you're invisible.
Mm.
So kids are they are the best. Kids are the best evaluators of teachers. So I think if you are a Black and brown teacher, the one thing that I wish, like when people talked about these, like the social impact of teachers, is like it's not the social impact of Black and brown teachers. It's a social impact of good Black and brown teachers.
Right.
So so you have to take your craft seriously. You have to understand that your value add, you have the responsibility to add to your professional value. So that
Mhm.
means you have to practice, you have to study, and you have to make sure that you're prepared. And
Yeah.
that's something that I learned the hard way. I started teaching at 21 years old. I just thought I could just roll up in front of kids. I'm fresh out of school. I'm 10 years, I'm like 9 years older than y'all. The kids tore me apart, because once they figured out that I didn't know what I was doing, and I wasn't prepared, that's that. But I think once that's something that individual teachers have to come with, regardless of where they are. I think there have a couple of things that schools can do. Number one, it's important to have like affinity groups. It would be good to have affinity groups, whether formally, informally,
Yeah.
where teachers of color can kind of like collaborate and come together, not to complain, not to just eat lunch together, but to understand that you do have a different challenge.
Yeah.
Like I'm 6'4", 245, whether I like it or not. Somebody's gonna be scared of me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And it is not gonna feel good. What is that like when you walk into a school as a man, and if you have some size to you, that people automatically assume that one, you're good for discipline only. Two, you're automatically gonna get the kids that nobody else can handle because you're the man.
Mm-hmm.
Three, like the parental expectations of the fact that in some cases you're fulfilling the societal void. So your voice matters more because like in some cases you're filling a father voice. So if you don't call that parent back as quickly as they want you to, they're going to get extra offended because it's you. You know what I'm saying? So like, and that comes with the sense of pressure, because if like for me, I remember like when I first went to Bronx Prep, someone met with the parent teacher association at the time. It was like, oh, you gonna pick up our kids and take them to the park on Saturday mornings? I was like, no, I'm not. Because I gotta take my son to the park on Saturday morning. Like there has to be a line. But I was able to, I was like, I'll go to your kids' games. I'll like involve as much as I can into your kids' lives, but that's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to educate your kids and to show them that I care about them as a whole person. My job is not to pick up your kid every Saturday morning and go get ice cream. I got to do that with my own kid.
Right.
You know, it's like, so like having those groups where you start to flesh out and have those discussions. How do you even interact with your peers? And I think, again, going back to Livingstone, we were trained on that in undergrad. So we knew like that part of the Center for Teaching Excellence is that we had sessions where we talked about some of those things. So it became, you know what I'm saying? It was something that we just did, and it became something. So you apply that knowledge, but like having those groups where Black and brown teachers can really thin slice and understand the unique components of being Black and brown on these jobs.
Right.
And then also a clear career growth pattern. Because a lot of times people leave education because it's like, okay, I've taught for 10 years, now what? Now what?
Yeah.
You know, like, and I think it's incumbent upon the leaders of educators, regardless of color. Like, you could start here today, but I'm going to coach you so you're going to get better at your craft. And eventually you're going to kind of age out of teaching. Now there's something else to do, or there's something else in addition to. So there's always opportunities to grow and get better. And I think a lot of times, I remember like a lot of times for us as a Black male teacher, is like, you're the gym teacher, you're the emotional rah-rah guy, you're going to make the speech that's going to make everybody whole and get little daring to go to class, whatever.
Right.
And that's just not your personality, right? You know what I'm saying? But you have to learn how to fight those assumptions and learn what that looks like. But you also have the responsibility from who leads you to not just put you in positions. Like, and I think a lot of times with Black leaders, with Black teachers, we're going to get the crappy jobs. We're going to get the jobs where the kids are, the school's messed up, the school's broke, half the teachers leave every year, and we got to go fix it, be like the miracle man, right? And sometimes that can fold people a little bit, because it's exceptionally difficult. And I think, having, quite frankly, lived that experience, you understand. Part of starting Ubuntu is the idea is that you want to pass those lessons on. So like those trying times that I had when I was working in some of the schools, I can't eliminate them, but I want to mitigate you if you're put in those situations. But going back to the original question, I think the idea is Black and brown teachers have to respect the teacher profession and field as a craft.
Right.
And respect it. You're not going to just get over because you're Black.
That's right.
And you young. That's just not going to happen. And kids will walk right. The kids will see through you and walk over you. You have to have, it would be nice if schools and districts have like affinity groups where people of color can kind of come together and thin slice their problems. You got to have clear growth trajectories within your schools once you've earned it, and you got to have fair positioning
Yeah.
where you're not just the automatic problem solver, block sweeper. Hey, there's 75 kids hanging out on the corner. Go get Mr. Johnson. He's gonna save. No, like you can't just do that. And I think that's where a lot of times people get kind of turned off.
Right. No, so it sounds like some of the understanding of office politics and corporate politics, some of our black and brown teachers need to understand how that game is played in the education field as well in order to preserve their career and for them to be successful. And I even like the fact that you shared about the kids being BS detectors, with the teachers. That also, lets these teachers know, like, okay, this is you need to take yourself seriously. And if kids don't see you care, they're not gonna care. So I'm glad you was able to reinforce that with us out here, man. And the education field is, a lot of similarities with the business world. It's just less people, but there's a lot of dynamics involved. And in some
Mm.
cases, probably a lot more.
Yeah, and the thing is that as if a black male teacher is the equivalent to a white woman NBA coach. If you think about it, because you are the minority in terms of race and in terms of gender, right?
Yep.
So like the NBA is like what, 75% black male?
Yep.
The education field is majority female, and depending on where you work, most times not even females of color.
Right.
So you have to and you have to understand how to navigate those fields where you keep a sense of who you are as a person, not while still like the idea of being non-threatening is quite frankly insulting, but the idea that you are capable of doing anything that anybody else is doing, and it doesn't matter what you may, type me as just because of what I look like.
I appreciate that, B. Appreciate you sharing that and totally can relate to it. All right, we just got a couple of questions left, but the next one is about work-life balance. So I wanted to get back to you on that. So how do you manage your work-life balance with your family, career? And do you have any helpful tips that you can provide, especially how folks can separate their professional life and their personal life, as you mentioned earlier?
I think one, you're not gonna is there's no such thing as work-life balance. It's work-life fulfillment, because your life is not going to be balanced, right? Because balance is like, you spend the most time away from your job sleeping. So the idea is work-life fulfillment. Like if you sleep, let's say if you work a 10-hour day and you got to commute, so that's 11 hours. You only got like 3-4 hours left being awake, right? so that's not balance in itself. But the idea is fulfillment. I think a couple of things that I do. Number one is I schedule my time. Like I literally invest an hour every Sunday, and I schedule my free time and I schedule my work time. And the first thing that I do every week, I put them together as one, is I schedule 2 things for myself that have nothing to do with work. At least 2. So if it's like, hey, I like to watch basketball, I like to watch college football, I like to watch, I'm a sports guy. So I'm going to make sure that I dedicate something for me, and I'm going to schedule it and make sure that I bend my time to that first. Yep. So I'm going to commit to myself to watch a whole game. I'd make sure that I schedule time for family stuff. I'll make sure that like, hey, we going to the park. You know what I'm saying? Hey, we're going to read books, or hey, like something like you schedule that time in as well too. You want to make sure that like there's time that is dedicated for the things that matter to you. And then you carve out time when possible to text, call, write, whatever people. So you don't feel like guilty for working so hard, and you don't feel like you're missing out on something.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Even for me, like I play music as I'm working, or I listen to podcasts as I'm working, especially if I'm working on like an extended assignment. So at least I know what's happening around the world,
Yeah.
like in the background. It's like, so it's not like I just run to school, eat, go to the bathroom, wake up.
Right.
Like there's some depth to who I am as a person, and I try
Sure.
to
Yeah.
maintain that. You know what I'm saying? Because ultimately, I'm replaceable at any job that I have, or even with Ubuntu. I
Right.
you start your consultant services, you get replaced tomorrow, but I'm
Right.
not replaceable to friends, family, loved ones, and to myself. So I have to make sure that I water that seed continuously. So then when
Mhm.
I do have to put in the extra hours, or I do have to get up earlier than I want to, or whatever the case may be, I don't feel like I'm losing out as much. And that makes me more apt to doing the work without like regret. And
Mm.
also, quite frankly, exercise.
Yes.
You got to, because I think we're in that position, when you're grinding, you're grinding, you're grinding. Next thing you know, you get a little pain in your chest. Next thing you know, your shirt don't fit anymore. Next thing you know, and then your blood pressure is high, whatever.
Yep.
And it's like you have to take care of yourself. You don't, have to be a yogi or anything, but like cut the junk food to a
Yep.
reasonable level,
Yep.
you know, run, do some push-ups, some
Yep.
sit-ups if your gym is closed, buy some resistance bands. You can even do it while you're watching TV,
Yeah.
at the same time, like do take care of yourself, because number one, it makes you a healthier person too. Quite frankly, I get most of my ideas for stuff that I want to do when I'm working out.
Absolutely.
Like I'm like, oh, like even today I was running this morning and there's something I'm going to do for the school. I was like, oh, just popped in my head when I was working out. So it's like when I was running. I mean, yeah, so those things happen, and you just want to make sure that you take care of yourself. So you schedule your time. You make sure you prioritize yourself and the people that are closest to you. You make sure you prioritize social outlets, and you prioritize time to take care of your body as much as you can. I'm not going to say I look like Arnold Schwarzenegger or nothing like that, but it's like
Right.
you take care of yourself so that you can, like, you don't feel ashamed because you can't fit in the clothes that you could fit into 3 years ago, or you don't have like high blood pressure or whatever. Like I had COVID in the spring, and when I got it, when I went to the doctor, one thing they said was like, your blood pressure is pretty good. Like mom say, yeah, like she's like almost an athlete's blood pressure. And I was like, I'm not athlete. She was like, well, you must take care of yourself. You must drink a lot of water and do something because your blood pressure is pretty damn good. I was like, yeah, thank you. Like, and I
Yep.
kept, and quite frankly, you never know what that can lead to. But I think those are the things that you got to take care of yourself, and you got
Yeah.
to take care of your mind, your heart, your body.
Now that's important, man. Especially, understanding holistically how exercise fits, how family time fits, because even myself, I'm sure you at one point got caught up in the rat race, trying to make as
Yeah,
much money as you can, trying to be a part of this, trying to be a part of that, and you read so many stories about folks they put time into their craft and they up to wee hours of the morning. But it's like, okay, they do that to get successful, but then how are they maintaining everything else? And these type of stories that you're sharing about your journey and what me and you talk about offline, these are the things that our community needs to understand that we need to do to sustain ourselves. So I'm glad that you were able to share the importance of exercising and eating right and living in moderation,
yeah,
and maintaining a good family balance and friend balance and understanding that you can be replaced by any job or any business you started, but your family and friends is not replaceable. That's something I wish I would have learned in my 20s, and I'm sure you would say the
yeah.
same thing.
Which I learned too. Yeah, I just, yeah, I wish I learned too. Life would have been a lot easier. But I think, just going back to something I said earlier, is the difference between what you do and who you are. And I think you have to water both sides. You gotta, like, who you are and what you do sometimes are not compatible. Like, but that's okay. They
Hmm.
can be diametrically opposed, but that makes you a whole person. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I honestly, on Thursday night, I was joking with my staff yesterday. I was Friday, yeah, yesterday. I was like, yeah, the Giants lost again. But it was like, and it was funny because a couple of people know I watch football. And like for the first minute or so, people were like, Giants suck. God, yeah, they really suck. But I'm a regular guy. Like I
Yep.
like stuff. Like I have interests. You know what I'm saying? And it's like something that sometimes it makes you more relatable as a leader, but it makes
Yep.
me feel better as a human being that I'm not missing out on life. Like I want to live. I
Right.
don't just want to exist. And sometimes you feel like when you're in that rat race, you just existing.
Yeah.
Next thing you wake up and it's like February. It's like, it was just like November, like last week. You know what I'm saying? It's like you gotta like live.
Yeah, man, the Giants, man. It makes me appreciate them Super Bowl championships in 07 and 11 that much more, and appreciate Eli, man. But we're playing hard. We'll get there, man. Young team, not a lot of talent. We'll get there.
Yeah, eventually, right? But at least you have the mindset to actually watch it. You know what I'm saying? Have a hobby, and not just be like this one track person that's just all about work. Because work is important, but it's not who you are. That's just what you do.
Absolutely, you got to have healthy hobbies, and even myself, even during COVID, I got into playing chess. I learned how to play chess many years ago, but stopped, and I got back into it. And I play a couple of games a night on my phone on an app, man, and I be into it, man. It's a real good mind game. It's good for meditation. It's good for just taking your mind away from things, and it's a thinking game. It's strategy, but it's fun. Because you playing the computer and the computer kicks my butt 98% of the time, but I win a couple of times or whatever. But that's like one of the healthy hobbies that I have now is playing chess and stuff. So
like one of the healthy things I picked up, quite frankly, is just watch a lot of documentaries. Like, because again, that's that seeking spirit. And it's just like, what about this? Let me watch that, or have it on in the background when I'm doing something else. Like, it's just like your mind is racing. It could get restless. And you got to feed it, and then you feed it, you become a better person.
Absolutely. So for those out there, man, good work-life balance or work-life fulfillment, as Mr. George says, healthy habits. It's not, separate what you do from who you are. You can be replaceable in your jobs, but you can't be replaceable with your friends and family, and just make sure you understand that. So, the next to last question for you, man, is what was the best book you read in the past 5 years?
Two, as actually, I'm going to cheat a little bit if you don't mind.
Sure, no, go ahead, man.
One is The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. I think again, it's the baseline for why you do the educational work that you do, right? And it's like, this is what happens. This is the script that society lays out for us, and this is how. To me, that's that. Like, all right, this is why, like, when you don't feel like necessarily doing something for like your schools or whatever, it's like, all right, this is why you got it, because what's in the background. The second, which quite frankly got me like really thinking about being a business owner and doing and feeding the entrepreneurial spirit, is a book called How Rich People Think by Steve Seibold. And it talked about like how, like, first of all, it got me to really think about not putting limitations on what I can do.
Right.
Like, I am capable of doing anything that I put my mind to and my heart into. Two, it really forced me to think about ownership. What does ownership look like of your career? And three, it really forced me to think deeply about what problems can you solve? And the idea about businesses is that businesses solve problems.
Yeah.
And that's literally why the best businesses exist, because they solve a problem. So, and it really started to get me thinking about, like, what can I do in addition to what I already do to solve the problems that I know exist? Because if you like start a business to like make money, like, everybody wants to make money, right? That's like, nobody wants to do nothing for free. You know what I'm saying? But the idea is that if you do something from the heart and you do something because you love it, and you do start a business because you genuinely want, you see a problem, you see a niche, and you think that you know that you can fill that niche and add value, you can make more money than you would if you just wanted to just make money.
Yeah.
Right. So the one thing that when I'm thinking about a business plan that I developed or services that I developed, I didn't put a price to it yet. Because to me, it's about the clarity of the work. It's like, oh, and it brought me to like, okay, normally consultant firms serve schools. No, I want to serve schools. I want to serve individual teachers. I want to serve prospective teachers. I want to do these things because this is what I can do. Because if these things happen well, the kids that these adults will touch will get better. Right. And that's literally the whole idea. The whole idea of Ubuntu is I am because we are.
Right.
And that's literally it. And that came from the book. And it's the idea of like, okay, I have this talent, I have this experience, I have this drive still, like I feel strongly about what I do. Like, how do you, again, the multiplier effect. Right. And I think that's something that's that next step for me. And I think the multiplier effect, or doing it outside of the comfort zone that I've been in where I work, so it's like thinking about those ways where you could challenge yourself. And I think for me, that is something, that book drove me to where I am right now, which is like ready to start my own business in addition to serving the kids that I serve and feeling comfortable that I can do both well.
Yeah, I definitely need to get that book. I heard about the new Jim Crow, but I definitely need to get the book, How the Rich People Think. I'm into them type of books, The Successful Millionaire Next Door, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, all those type of those success books, mental books that get you to shift your mindset. I love them books. So yeah, I'm definitely going to.
Yeah, he gave the example of Henry Ford. Like Henry Ford didn't have a doctorate. He had like a third grade education. He had people that had doctors that worked under him.
Right.
And so it was like, makes sense, right? So, but I think for me, and that's that next frontier as a professional, like the idea of like doing something that is successful the right way for the right reason.
Mm-hmm. Nah, well said, man. So, this great interview. All good things have to come to an end, unfortunately. But before you go, man, where can folks find you online, man? Do you have a website? Are you on LinkedIn? Are you on Insta? Because you got folks that are younger, they on Insta, or even if Twitter, if you dare.
No, right now, my website is under development for Unbuntu, but that's gonna go out with when I launch the website same day. So I want to make sure, like, again, you roll out everything correctly. I'm not gonna put out something until I know it's right because it's about quality. Yep. But I'll follow up with what that looks like. LinkedIn, Emmanuel George, Facebook, Emmanuel George. I think that's where yes, where you can find me.
Cool. All right, everyone. Well, that wraps up episode 4, man. Yo, again, Mr. George, it was a pleasure catching up with you, my fellow Livingstone College alum, fellow New Yorker, man. He's just doing great things out here. I told you guys he's the modern day Joe Clark, man. I love this guy, man, and he just keeps making it happen in the world, man. And I'm, looking forward to Ubuntu making it happen and taking off, man. So for all you guys out there, thanks for tuning in this episode. Thanks again, Mr. George, for gracing us with your presence and your story. And until next time, peace out.